Abigail, why are you living in a damp basement in Rogers Park when you own the loft on Wacker Drive? Grandma Margaret didn't wait for appetizers. She just dropped the grenade right onto the dinner plates. My mother, Brenda, let out a high-pitched, guilty laugh. Oh, Margaret. Caleb is just watching the property for us. Grandma slammed her hand down hard enough to rattle the wine glasses. Watching it? I drove by an hour ago. There is a rave happening on the balcony. Caleb didn't even look up from his phone. But the smirk on his face told me everything I needed to know. My sanctuary was gone. Before I tell you what Grandma Margaret pulled out of her bag next, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. My name is Abigail, and I am 28 years old. By day, I am a digital architect. I design impenetrable server infrastructures for Fortune 500 companies, building systems that can withstand cyber attacks and massive traffic surges. I create order out of chaos for a living. But by night, I go home to an illegal garden unit in Rogers Park that smells like mildew and failure. It is a damp, subterranean box, where the windows look out onto the tires of parked cars. This was the contradiction of my life. I built palaces for data, but I lived in a hole because I was convinced it was the right thing to do for my family. The loft on Wacker Drive wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was my sanctuary. I had spent 5 years saving, and 2 years designing every inch of it. I wanted floor-to-ceiling windows to catch the Chicago sunrise, and industrial steel beams to hold the weight of my private server racks. It was supposed to be the one place where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit someone else's mess. It was supposed to be mine. But 3 years ago, my mother, Brenda, called me in tears. Caleb had bad luck again. His roommates had kicked him out over a misunderstanding, she said. He just needed a place to crash for a week. Just a week. That was the lie that stole my life. A week turned into a month. A month turned into a year. Every time I tried to reclaim my keys, Brenda would look at me with those wounded, watery eyes and ask why I was being so cruel. She would tell me that Caleb was fragile, that he was finally getting his life together, and that evicting him would push him over the edge. You might wonder why a woman who negotiates million-dollar contracts couldn't throw out a 25-year-old man-child. It wasn't because I was weak. It was because I was programmed. From the time I was 5 years old, I was taught a simple, toxic equation. My worth in this family was measured solely by how much I could sacrifice for Caleb. He was the golden child, the special one who needed protection from the world. I was the scapegoat, the utility player, the safety net. If Caleb failed a test, it was because I didn't help him study. If he crashed his car, it was because I didn't drive him. I wasn't raised to be a daughter. I was raised to be a resource. Brenda had installed a button in my brain that dispensed guilt whenever I tried to prioritize myself, and she had been pressing it for decades. I sat there at the dinner table, looking at Caleb's smirk as he texted on his phone, indifferent to the fact that he was living in my dream home while I rotted in a basement. I realized then that I hadn't been helping him. I had been feeding a parasite. They thought they had conditioned me to accept this forever. They thought I would stay in the dark, paying the bills and keeping my mouth shut. But they forgot one critical thing about architects. We know exactly where the load-bearing walls are, and we know exactly how to bring the whole structure down. The dinner had disintegrated into awkward silence, but the real noise was about to start. My phone vibrated against the mahogany table, lighting up with a priority alert from my credit monitoring service. It wasn't a subtle nudge. It was a screaming red banner warning of a major derogatory event. I didn't wait to excuse myself. I unlocked the screen and tapped the notification. One glance was all it took to turn my blood into ice water. The alert wasn't about a late payment or a new credit card. It was a notification from the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. A new lien had been recorded against the property on Wacker Drive. I didn't waste time asking my mother for an explanation. I didn't ask Caleb why he was suddenly looking so interested in the ceiling. I opened the county portal on my phone, right there at the dinner table. The document loaded instantly. High resolution and undeniable. It was a cash-out refinancing agreement for $650,000, and at the bottom of the page, right above the notarized stamp, was my signature. I stared at the loop of the A in Abigail. It was almost perfect, a near-exact replica of the way I signed contracts. But I knew where I was on the date listed next to the signature. I was in a server room in Seattle, overseeing a migration for a cloud computing giant. I hadn't signed this. Someone else had. And looking across the table at my mother's trembling hands, I didn't need a handwriting expert to tell me who held the pen. I scrolled to the disbursement page. The money hadn't gone into a joint account or a family trust. It had been wired in a single lump sum to a shell company based in Malta, a known haven for unregulated crypto exchanges. $650,000 of equity, my savings, my sweat equity, the appreciation of the property I had rehabilitated with my own hands was gone. It had been converted into digital tokens, and likely blown on high-stakes online poker before the ink was even dry. But the financial theft wasn't the final blow. I clicked Next Document. A quitclaim deed appeared on the screen. Grantor: Abigail. Grantee: Caleb. For the consideration of $10, I had apparently signed over full ownership of the loft to my brother. My name was gone. Erased. Legally, I was a stranger to my own home. Caleb wasn't just watching the property, he owned it. The room seemed to tilt. This wasn't just toxic family dynamics anymore. This wasn't just favoritism or a lack of boundaries. This was a felony. They hadn't just asked for help. They had stolen my identity, liquidated my assets, and laundered the proceeds offshore. I looked up from my phone. Brenda was watching me, her eyes pleading, silently begging me not to make a scene, to just swallow it like I always did. Caleb was smirking, secure in the belief that his big sister would never send her own family to jail. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, mathematical clarity settle over me. They had rewritten the code of our relationship, assuming I was just a glitch they could bypass. They were about to learn that I wasn't a glitch. I was the architect, and I was about to initiate a system purge. I stumbled out of my parents' house, the cold Chicago wind hitting my face, but it didn't cool the burning panic in my chest. $650,000. Fraud. Identity theft. My credit score. My career. My sanctuary, everything I had built was currently dissolving into a cloud of offshore crypto dust. I reached for my car door, my hand shaking so badly I dropped my keys in the snow. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, looking out of place among the suburban sedans. The back window rolled down silently. Grandma Margaret didn't look like a grandmother waiting with cookies. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer a hug. She simply said, "Get in." It wasn't a suggestion. I climbed into the leather seat, the warmth of the car wrapping around me, but I couldn't stop shivering. "They took it," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "They forged my name. They refinanced the loft. It's gone, Grandma. The bank owns it now." Margaret didn't offer a tissue. She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a thick manila folder, dropping it onto my lap with a heavy thud. "Open it." I opened the folder. Inside was a document I recognized but hadn't thought about in years. A land trust agreement, dated 5 years ago. "Do you remember what I told you when we bought that shell?" she asked, her voice calm and terrifyingly precise. "I told you that you were the architect, but I was the fortress." "I don't understand," I said, staring at the legal seals. "You are the beneficiary, Abigail. But I am the trustee. The title to that property is held in the trust. You don't have the legal authority to sell it, transfer it, or refinance it without my signature." She pointed a manicured finger back at the house we just left. "That means the signature they forged? It's worthless. The quitclaim deed? Void. The mortgage lien? It didn't attach to the property because the owner didn't sign it." The realization hit me harder than the cold wind. The bank or whatever predatory lender they used didn't have a claim on my home. They had a claim on Caleb and Brenda. My mother and brother hadn't just committed fraud. They had personally guaranteed a $650,000 loan that was secured by absolutely nothing. They had walked into a bear trap thinking it was a gold mine. "So, the house," I started, my voice trembling, "is safe," Margaret finished. "But they are not." She tapped on the partition, signaling the driver. The engine purred to life, a low growl that matched the look in her eyes. "Your mother thinks she can gaslight you into silence. Your brother thinks he can steal your life and laugh about it. They think you are helpless because you are kind. But they forgot that kindness has a limit." She looked at me, her expression hardening into diamond-edged resolve. She smoothed her coat, looking straight ahead as the car pulled away from the curb. "We are going to Wacker Drive. Tonight. And we are taking it back." We pulled up to the curb on Wacker Drive, and the bass from the loft was so loud it vibrated the car windows. The building, usually a quiet industrial conversion, was lit up like a nightclub. Caleb hadn't just thrown a party. He had occupied the territory. Grandma Margaret didn't wait for the driver to open her door. She stepped out onto the pavement, the folder clutched in her hand like a weapon. I followed, my legs feeling steadier now, fueled by the cold anger radiating off her. 2 private security guards, thick-necked and serious, were waiting by the entrance. Margaret nodded to them once. "Clear the way." We bypassed the doorman who looked relieved to see someone taking charge and took the private elevator directly to the penthouse floor. As the doors slid open, the noise was deafening. The smell of cheap vodka and expensive cologne hit us immediately. My sanctuary was unrecognizable. Furniture was overturned. Strangers were dancing on my custom-designed workstations, and Caleb was standing on the kitchen island, popping a bottle of champagne over a cheering crowd. Grandma Margaret walked over to the main electrical panel near the entrance. She didn't shout. She didn't ask for attention. She simply flipped the main breaker. The music died instantly. The lights cut out, plunging the room into sudden, shocked silence, illuminated only by the glow of 100 cell phone screens. "Party's over," she announced, her voice projecting effortlessly into the void. "Get out." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Someone booed. Caleb jumped down from the island, looking more annoyed than afraid. "Who turned the—" He spotted us. "Grandma? Abigail? What are you doing? You're ruining the vibe." "The vibe is theft, Caleb," Margaret said. Stepping into the center of the room, she signaled one of the security guards, who turned on a high-powered flashlight, spotlighting Caleb like a criminal in a lineup. Then she pulled a document from her folder and held it up. "This is a land trust agreement. It proves that the loan you took out against this property is invalid. The money you spent? That's not a mortgage. That is now a personal debt. Yours. And your mother's." Caleb laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "You're crazy." "I have the deed," Mom said. "Mom lied," I said, stepping forward. My voice was calm, cutting through the murmurs of his friends. "She lied to you, and you lied to the bank, and now, you owe $650,000 to people who don't send overdue notices. You owe them personally." The color drained from his face. The guests, realizing this wasn't a skit, began to scatter, pushing past the security guards to get to the elevator. Brenda appeared from the hallway, looking frantic. "Margaret, please. Not in front of his friends. He's just a boy." Margaret turned her gaze on my mother. "He is a 25-year-old felon, and you are his accomplice." She gestured to the security team. "Remove him. If he resists, call the police and report a trespassing in progress. I have the emergency order of protection right here." Caleb tried to bluster, to shout about his rights, but the security guards moved him toward the door with efficient, practiced force. He looked back at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and hatred. "You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me." "I didn't plan anything," I said, watching him being dragged out of the home I built. "I just stopped saving you." The heavy steel door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot, signaling the end of an era. The heavy steel door had barely clicked shut behind my screaming mother and brother when the smell hit me. It wasn't the stale beer or the cheap cologne anymore. It was sharp, chemical, and stinging. It smelled like a public swimming pool doused in ammonia. My stomach dropped. I turned on my heel and ran toward the back of the loft, past the ruined living area to the reinforced door of my server room. This was the nerve center of my career, a climate-controlled vault housing the proprietary architecture I had built for 3 years. It held the local copies of every project, every client key, every line of code that justified my billing rate. The keypad lock was hanging off the frame by a single wire. The door stood ajar. I pushed it open and the fumes nearly knocked me backward. It looked like a crime scene from a slasher movie, but instead of blood, there was fluid dripping from the racks. My custom-built towers were battered, the casings dented as if hit with a baseball bat. But the physical damage wasn't the killer. It was the liquid pooling on the floor, eating into the laminate. I walked closer, covering my nose with my sleeve. An empty gallon jug of industrial-strength bleach lay on its side in the corner. Caleb hadn't just partied in my house. He had methodically poured bleach into the ventilation fans of my server racks. He had stood here, while the music played outside, and listened to the hardware sizzle and die. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't collateral damage from a wild night. This was an assassination. I stood in a puddle of chemical waste, staring at the wreckage of my servers. Caleb's meltdown was textbook an extinction burst. He knew the house and the money were gone, so he tried to destroy the one thing he could never take from me: my competence. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Oops. Guess we're both broke now." He thought he'd drag me down with him. He didn't realize I was already gathering evidence. Photos of the damage. A screenshot of his text. He hadn't just vandalized my servers. He'd committed a felony. The police sergeant's tone changed when I valued the loss. 80,000 in hardware. Over 2 million in proprietary IP. With Caleb's text confession, they issued a warrant. He was arrested hours later, crying and calling it a joke. Brenda begged me to drop the charges. "He's your brother, he's just a boy." "He's 25 and he made a choice," I said. And then I told her the part that broke her. I have cloud backups. Every file, every schematic. He destroyed nothing but his own future. Caleb pled out 5 years for grand larceny and cybercrime. Brenda lost access to Grandma Margaret's money, and now works retail. Her emails accusing me of destroying the family go into a folder called evidence. I rebuilt the loft, new walls, new equipment, No ghosts. The silence feels like peace instead of dread. My business doubled. My servers hum behind biometric locks. Looking out over Chicago, I finally understand. Empty space isn't loss. It's room to build. They tried to drag me down to their level, but they forgot who I am. I'm the architect, and now I'm building a life that's mine.